Well, if you watched my previous upload, you'll know that we ended on a bit of a disappointing note. The brand new thermal switch that I bought, which is this one right here, didn't end up working. It was a dud. I did get my new one. The triggers are a lower temperature than this one. This one's a 95 to 102. The one that I bought was, I believe, 75 to 83 degrees Celsius. So considerably cooler. However, this one's a triangle plug, whereas my new one's a square one. So I got a little creative. I depinned this. You know, basic geometry says that a triangle is not going to fit on a square, but I have to get creative. So that's where it leaves us for today. Alongside of that, I have a couple other things that are unrelated to that, but just things that I need to knock out as we kind of keep moving forward and to the final result. So one of those things that I would love to get done today is getting this fluid damper installed. This should be pretty quick. I'll go into a little bit more detail as to what they are, what the purpose of them are. A lot of people think that these are kind of a waste of money. Promise you they're not. The other one though is this pretty neat harness bar. So this will facilitate both the harnesses that I do plan to get in conjunction to some fixed back bucket seats. And this should also bring back the rigidity that the rear seats were providing now that they've been completely deleted. So it'll play, you know, a few roles, but yeah, like I said, these are in very different spots. I don't know how to make this flow super well, but enough rambling. Let's get started with task number one. So I've removed the harness here just so then I could more easily depin and work with the pins here. So the reason I shrink wrap the terminals is kind of a dual purpose. So since they're no longer going to be sitting inside of a housing, I did want to protect them a little bit from the elements. And, you know, prevent any possible shorting if they come loose or anything like that. So I do have the correct plug coming. I just don't have an ETA for that. So yeah, that's the harness. And I'll show you here the switch. So the switch is hiding down there. It's gonna be a little tricky. I gotta get it all plugged in. And I have to find a way to, I guess, find the pins and slot them in correctly. So let's see if I can do this. All right, well, I think I got it. So, I mean, I guess we test now. And we've got the coolant temp on there, so now we just wait until we trigger. So we've just reached operating temperature. So the thermostat should start opening now and running coolant through the radiator, which should obviously in turn trigger the switch as soon as the switch gets hot enough. The hose that feeds the radiator is still pretty cool to the touch, so we're not quite up to temp yet. And we're on. Well, there they go. And they bring the temp down relatively quick, which is really impressive. So I think what I'll have to do, and this is something I planned on doing anyway, the thermostat on there is still factory, so the thermostat is closing, and the temperature is barely hitting. So it's keeping the car at operating temp, which is good. As you can see, we're hanging out right at 91, which is awesome. I've got a few tricks up my sleeve for what we're gonna do here, but at least I know and can confirm, as you can hear it now, that these are now working. And they're both running because the temperature is on the hotter side for both of them. So I'll take it. All right, so that makes me really happy. I'm glad I can knock this off the list. I don't know how well my voice was coming through while the engine was on, But just to quickly recap where we're gonna go after that to kind of tie it all together is I'm gonna swap out the thermostat. I'm still running a factory thermostat that opens up right around 90 degrees Celsius, which is why the car was hanging out at 92 degrees, which is perfect. It's been idling there. It wasn't getting any hotter or cooler, which is great. So when the engine comes out and we're putting everything back together, we'll jump back into the topic of a cooler thermostat and doing a drill mod, and we'll kind of go from there. So with that being said, we're gonna leave this alone. We're good. We're gonna move on to the next thing, which is gonna be the fluid damper. So this right here is a fluid damper. Now, what is it and why would you want one? Well, to oversimplify, every time an engine fires, it creates a torsional vibration, which for the most part is inevitable. However, the factory damper is designed and is generally tuned to a very specific harmonic frequency. Once you start modifying the engine outside of stock specs, you're outside of that range. So you may be thinking like, great, I've modified my car, it's been running like this for years, I haven't had a problem. And I'm sure you haven't. Problems that you aren't able to notice or verify or anything like that, because they are there. And you can effectively boil this down to, say, running shoes. Can you run effectively with non-running shoes? Yeah, absolutely, but in the long term, you're gonna mess up your feet. Whereas you get the appropriate kind of shoe and you can do this a lot better. So it doesn't mean that your engine's just gonna explode or anything like that, and some people refer to it as an insurance policy. So someone who likes to overbuild and make sure that I cover all of my bases and is trying to build the most reliable setup that I'm capable of building, I'm gonna throw one on. I wanna be able to abuse my car, I wanna street drive it, I wanna track it. So being able to create a solid foundation of preventative measures and things that I know will take care of my engine in the long run, I can abuse it without thinking about it, not worrying about it. Why not eliminate as many of the risk factors that have solutions to them so you can just abuse the car? With that being said, let's go ahead and get this thing installed. Should be pretty quick, but I'll show you what we're working with. All right, so the first thing we gotta do is we gotta remove the serpentine, or at least loosen it up. Take that belt off. And then we just gotta take the 4 bolts out, which are pretty easy to pull out. If you don't have an impact, you do have to somehow, either on the flywheel side or on here, you'll have to make sure that this doesn't rotate on you while you try to do it. With an impact, however, should come right out. I'm gonna get an extension for this one. And it's been a while since I've taken it off, so it might need a little bit of encouragement. If you're gonna be doing this at home, just double check, just to make sure that your timing mark there is also visible and that you pay attention to that, make sure that you align them. You do have some holes there that do line up with a little bulbous bit here to make sure that it aligns only in one direction, but you always just wanna cover all your bases. And by the looks of it, I am going to have to give it a little encouragement here. So let's see. Well, to be fair, that has been on there for quite a bit and the engine is still kind of warm. I am going to clean this off real quick and then we'll compare the two. So here they are side by side. Now this one is quite a bit thicker than the factory unit, but everything lines up as it should. It's not a point of contention or anything, doesn't cause any issues, just an observation. And like I said, these are generally made with some kind of rubber, and that rubber, again, the density is spec'd to something very specific, which will then negate the harsh harmonics of the stock engine within stock parameters. So once you start revving beyond the stock limits, once you start putting more power through it, put a lighter flywheel, things like that, things that change the vibration and the harmonics of the engine, that's when it makes sense to get one of these. I mean, really, it makes sense to get one of these at any point because, again, this is designed for a very specific point where the vibrations are the harshest, whereas this covers pretty much the entire gamut. It is a fluid, so the fluid responds to the vibration it receives. So quite a bit better, nicer, and yeah, so, and not that much heavier, so for anybody that feels like, oh, I don't want to put too heavy of a pulley, I would much rather have this. So let's go ahead and get this installed and wrap this one up as well. So that about does it for the front end. Super quick and easy, and we've got it all buttoned up now, so really all that's left is throwing the bumper on it. I've got some cables I got to take care of here, but I'll do that when I get the bumper on. So from here, it's just getting the harness bar installed, which I'm not entirely sure how easy that's going to be because I do want to put the panels back on, so I might have to trim it, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. So let's start removing the trim and seeing what we're working with. So if you're wondering where this harness bar gets installed, it actually goes in place of these pins here. These pins were originally for the rear seats. This is where they latch on. Obviously one on each side. So the triangulation of the seat gives you the rigidity. So that's what this will be bridging the gap for, quite literally. And in addition, obviously, as the name implies, it'll also be the harness bar. So once we get the seats here, I haven't pulled the trigger yet. I'm kind of going back and forth on a few seats that I want, but that's neither here nor there at the moment. So I do want to try to keep the panels in one piece as much as possible. We'll have to figure it out. I think this actually might be what holds these together. So I'll have to figure something out. If I got to take them out, I got to take them out, but I am going to try to keep them. Let's go ahead and try to get these pins removed, see what we're working with behind here. It'll give me a good chance to, fix stuff like this. I can take the springs out for these. These have been like this since I bought the car. It's been kind of annoying, but again, it's kind of out of sight, so I kind of forget about it. I've got a sweet 6-disc CD changer and a very old first aid kit on this side, so we've got some things we can remove. Let's dig in. Hopefully these panels aren't too hard to take out. Let's see what we got. So that's one side down. All right, so now with both sides out, I think we can start test fitting. So let's grab the bar and let's play around with that here. So it should go something like this. Try to get it even with the bottom here, but I also want to be mindful of where I'm going to situate it, because and I'll show you here in a second, but I'm concerned about how I'm going to get the inserts in the back here. It's a little tight. The angle is a little tight, so this might be challenging to get the inserts in the back, but the inserts in the front I think should be okay. That should be pretty easy. I've got all the room in the world up here. But yeah, otherwise it fits on pretty tight. It's pretty solid right now. I might grab a level and first check the level of the chassis, and then I'll just make sure that the bubble matches on here, that it's straight. But I think I'm pretty happy with the height. I'm gonna probably trim. I'm gonna have to trim around that before the panels can go on, but I think we're looking good. We're sitting pretty dead even, so really happy about that. Car's sitting pretty level, as is our bar. that's really annoying. So this side went fine. All the inserts I was able to get in. I still need to obviously crimp them in. However, this side, I'm only going to be able to get away with the bottom two. Not really concerned structurally, but I am kind of annoyed that, I mean, it's going to be covered up, but you can see that eyesore there. So the problem is where on this bracket, I don't know if you can see it. So behind this little tab here, oops, I dropped one. Behind this little tab here, and you can kind of see the spot welds right there. There's a reinforcement bar, but on this side, it sits just below where these are. Whereas on this one, that same bracket, you can see the spot welds on there, they're level with the top ones. So when I tried to drill through, see if I can get some light in there, you can very clearly see that there's a bracket back there, and it just made my bit walk and bite on the side. So yeah, I'm just annoyed that I drilled in there, ran into that. I had no idea that they were different on both sides. There aren't any instructions with this either, so I just went off of the installed pictures from the manufacturer and just kind of eyeballed it. Like I said, this side's fine, so this side's gonna get all 4 bolts. This side's just gonna get the bottom 2. So I'm mostly just upset about the eyesore there and the fact that I just completely destroyed that piece of bodywork there. So now that the threaded inserts are in, I think this is where it's going to get a little interesting. So I know it's a little tight on this backside. So obviously now we have a shoulder from the added threaded inserts. So I think this is going to become somewhat of a fight to get started. Well, to be completely honest, I'm not super thrilled about the fitment of this bar. Now, I will take accountability in the fact that I'm sure I probably could have done a much better job had I known that it wasn't going to be as straightforward as that. But as you can see, I at least got the bolts both on the front and the back side of this one, so I'm not entirely concerned. So two out of the 4 on that one, and 3 out of 4 on this one. Once it got bolted in, this backside twisted and didn't quite sit right, but this will be my own doing, so I'm not going to gloss over that fact. We'll just leave it at that. Either way, I'm happy with the product itself. And am I concerned about the structural integrity, the 2 versus the 4 bolts? Not in the least. The bar itself is really, really rigid on there. And obviously, I mean, you could see that it was a very, very tight fit. So I'm not concerned about the safety aspect of it. It's just the fact that I'm sitting here drilling holes into the body, and we're running into some random issues, and it just doesn't look professional. And you win some, you lose some. This is kind of what I'm dealing with. So as long as it's functional, it's going to be okay, which it is. So now I'm going to get the panels on it. I'm just going to do that real quick off camera. You don't need to see me struggling to put that on. So yeah, I'll show you the finished product here in a second. And just like that, I somehow find myself no longer upset. I'm really surprised with how well the panels fit. So I did very, very minimal trimming. This is effectively all I took out of both sides. Came out of these side panels right here. And it was really just cutting out the other end of the loop because it does a complete loop around that. So I just cut the end off so I could slide the panel on. And that was quite literally it. So you can obviously tell that there is a bit of a gap now with the bar being a little larger in diameter, but I mean, man, outside of that, I mean, you can't really even tell. And it looks the same on both sides. The panels went in without a fuss, so that says a lot. And yeah, so I got everything cleaned up, and yeah, I don't know what else to say. I'll say it again, I went from being completely annoyed and I mean, honestly kind of upset to completely forgetting about it. I'm super happy with how that turned out. I mean, like I said, I did very minimal work in terms of trimming the panels. I was fully expecting to spend some time there trimming, which is also why I wanted to do it off camera. So for it to just kind of like fall into place, I'll take it. The project redeemed itself. I don't know that I could have gotten any better results. But still, regarding the missing bolts and the trashed drilling, I'll revisit it at some other point. I'm not at all concerned about the structural or the safety of it. It's bolted on really well. It fits really, really tightly. I mean, it's almost kind of like a pinch fit. So there's no movement, no play. If anything, the bolts are there to really just kind of like hold it from falling off and moving. So it should do really, really well. I'm really excited to actually get some harnesses on there, but first, obviously I gotta get some seats. So that's a conversation for another day. But I think before I wrap things up, I want to take you guys for a ride. I haven't driven this thing in a little while. So let's hop in and test the parts that we just installed and see how it drives. Well, hopefully you guys can hear me. The TT is staying incredibly cool. It's sitting at 88, 89 degrees Celsius. And that's perfect. Operating temp is 90. Generally, while you're driving around, it gets, 90, 92, 95, somewhere around there. So for it to be sticking around that, I'm very, very pleased. It's also a little cooler outside, so maybe a hotter day will be a much better benchmark, but not bad with what we've got. I don't know about you guys, I don't know what you can hear, but what I hear makes me very, very happy. It's really nice to be dusting off the cobwebs off this thing. I haven't driven it forever. It's pulling really hard. It feels really, really smooth, and the coolant is staying at like 88, 89 degrees Celsius this entire time. I've been driving for about a half hour, and yeah, it's just been hanging out. So I'm gonna call that a success. I'm really happy with how it's sitting, and with the cooler thermostat that I intend to get, the temps will only get better.